Sup nerds? Own Goal here, bringing you a video on how to use Grail Knights to take over the game. Some folks have been asking about this because they're a cool, very fun unit. And while Bretonia is like a little bit underpowered right now, they still pack a pretty significant punch and are one of my favorite factions to play just for fun. So we're playing a quick battle game against the Skaven. These were blind picks. Our opponent is not somebody I've seen from tournament play, so not the most experienced. They brought a fine build that's a little short on tools to deal with Cav, which Brett tends to bring. So this is not a replay meant to show you like a really close interactive game. We're more trying to illustrate just like how do you use these units when it goes right. And then in future videos, if we get a good replay opportunity, we'll talk a little more about like how do you play through opposition. So starting out really fast, usually you want a life caster when you're going with heavy cav. Against Skaven, I sometimes like this like foot caster because block is really good and it gives you some ability to close out on well-protected range positions. On most maps, pincer is fine, like deploying into infantry things. This is a weird map because it's one of the base game maps where this whole center area is impassable. So our plan was to have one piece of arty, poke them a little bit, set up one collapse wherever they boxed, but not actually go in, and then swing around the back with cav and eventually do like a cav collapse. Really quickly, the grails, both this variant and the anti-large variant, are best against like squishy ranged units. And they'll pretty much erase like soft backline units. They're kind of like a super chariot also in that with their lance formation active, they can just absolutely run through infantry so long as it's not braced, and especially if they get rear charges. And they also will kill most SCs in the game efficiently. So it's just a really powerful unit. Their main vulnerability is to magic and shooting, or getting stuck in with elite infantry. So you kind of want to use them in a way where you're able to bounce around, just plowing through unbraced infantry and taking off like weak exposed SCs and ranged units. And that's kind of obvious, but the main downside is they're so expensive, and so you have this problem of creating holes in the enemy formation when you have ultra elite cav. Like, how do you do that? So Brett, to complement this, has these really cheap infantry units, and the most basic tactic and a really common good one is to walk peasant mobs or men at arms into enemy infantry, which unbraces them, and then to send a lance formation grail or knights of the realm like right through the now unbraced infantry, and they'll just cut through them like a knife through butter. So here, we're getting some pokes off on his he brought a council guard and two warp block chisels that we can see, so we're just getting like a little bit of trebuchet poke off while we set up for the collapse. He's pushed into like a weak spot, so we want to get our infantry pressed up on both sides, get our cav in position. Pausing here for a second, with grails, it really helps to plan out your dive route. So you want to like look at their formation and see if there's like any pockets of ranged units that are vulnerable. And they're really fast and they do a lot of like shock impact. So it's very plausible to like take out ranged units that are right by elite halberds like this. You need to just like micro them so you can kind of pop in, get a pick, get out. They complement the Green Knight especially, or any terror source generally, because you can use SEs like the Green Knight to run into a brace spear to unbrace it and then hit it with the Grail. And you can also use the terror on the Green Knight to get shock routes, which is really good. So that's like a general concept. And most of our tactics are going to revolve around infantry, getting a good surround and unbracing, and then taking them out. Here, we've been trying to get around the backside, and the Skaven player is contesting it. And this really shows you, like, they're doing pretty good damage to the Knights of the Realm, but this really shows you where Grails shine, because they'll kill basically anything that isn't, like, a whole lot of enemy cav or some, like, elite anti-cav infantry. And so he can keep throwing, like, mobility units like this into the Grails, and they'll just absolutely delete all of them. And we're using a Knight of the Realm in concert with it. And what we're doing with the Knight of the Realm is like preventing rear charges from mobility units like rats and chasing off less expensive things, while the Grails dive in on like the primary target. So using them in concert with cheaper cav, you can avoid them getting like surrounded and shot or charged. So that's a really key Grail tactic. And with Brett, you can create these like force imbalances, so we have like more value because of the grails over here. And what you want to avoid is taking a bad engage when some of your elite units are out of position. So here I decide to go in because he's in a weak position and his shooting pieces are compromised. Um, but if he had a better setup and like he maybe had some stronger defensive units than these Giselles, we wouldn't go in here. Instead, we would wait, try to like run the value on this fight as much as we can, and then eventually we would go in when our forces were all back together. So you can see we're just rolling him over here on the left. And this is like an illustration of what Grails do when they get to fight against ranged assets or other mobility units. They're just like incredible duelists. So they're, they haven't really taken much damage. They've got their vigor and they're just snowplowing this stuff. Well, that's going on. I wanted to illustrate like one of the primary tactics for lance formation. So like he's got all these braced units here, pretty weak units like Skaven Slave Spears covering his front line. And we could run through the gap, but actually they look at this. I love this unit. They hit so hard if a unit is unbraced that you don't actually really need to go through the gaps. You can just unbrace stuff and get a hit on the front line while you go through. And the effect of this is like if you run through the gaps and you don't get any damage on their spears, they can kind of collapse back and surround you. But here we put all these things into the territory of routing. And the play is like we just walk our infantry up, get it in melee, unbrace, and then we just click on their thing with our lance form cav and then go right on through like a greased pig. Usually they would have like rogers or some secondary, so we would need to dance around a little more, like get a spear on the roger, try to cav rear charge. This video is great because he doesn't have anything to stop the knights. So this can kind of show you like how to exploit exposed defensive formations. And typically, like the enemy won't be able to cover all your cavs, so you'll be able to get away with this kind of thing or shooting through the gaps somewhere. But this is just like a clean illustration of when they're not prepared, what can you do? So you can see like we wiped half of this one, we get a piece of the slingers, and then we're right on through onto the Giselles. And we'll emphasize this a lot. You want to have good target priority when you're using these like elite builds. So you want to understand what's important to kill and what's not, so that you can quickly make decisions about where to send things. And there, this is how you play around like elite anti-cav. You can see I like pop in, get some charges, get some terror routes, and then he doesn't get an opportunity to engage for very long with the infantry because we cycle out immediately. And in these kinds of like pocket situations, what you most want when you're cycling is a unit that's already unbraced, like a running unit, or to be able to get the rear on a unit. And it's best if you can, like, after you hit something, immediately toggle onto something else with the grails, because they're kind of like a Mega Mondo super chariot. With this perfect vigor and their speed, they do phenomenally ping ponging around between things. So you can see here, we'll take like a good chunk off this clan rat, and then after we get that charge, which also like impacts his leadership and tilts this combat, we're already on to like the next unbraced unit. And now his position is just completely overrun. He's basically lost. And we go for a lord pick. Again, the grails will kill SEs like almost nothing else. The green the green knight is the other thing that kills them that well. It's a very good duelist. So anytime you can get like a isolated character or expensive thing with the grail knights, you're pretty happy to just like take them on. And you can use your lighter cav to keep counter pieces off. So now we kind of just chase routing things, don't get stuck in with the halberds. And the biggest thing is to keep them moving. Another trick that's kind of nice, unless you're going to like fully finish off a unit, you don't really want to charge grails in opposite directions onto it, because they stop each other. And you want them to always be in motion. So if the pack can kind of be like heading in the same motion, so like, you do a bombing run out from the right or the left with like a strong flank, that'll tend to keep their momentum up, which can be really nice. And then sometimes when they have a good melee fight, you want to just stick them in and keep them. So the situation where you just like let them sit is they have a good target like that lord, and there's no like counter cav pieces coming on top of them. Or like in this case, they're up against Doomflayers, which is a really good matchup. So as you practice with these like elite cav, you want to kind of find the balance between tapping it like you saw earlier in the engage, when they hit something, and then staying in and sticking and finishing it off. And a lot of it is a judgment call on like, do they have a good matchup right now? Are they going to get counter engaged by anything? And are they actually going to do the most amount of damage on this target versus other target priority? So that's a quick intro on like how to overrun a position with Grail Knights. Let's take a quick look at how everything performed. So Lord did okay. Got zoned off. Got its value. That's fine. Infantry did its job. This Grail crushed. Already had paid for itself. Had lots of health and vigor left. This Grail also crushed. Cav did well, as to be expected, against an unprepared Skaven opponent. Overall, roster did well. And then on the Skaven side, I presume nothing really did much. Yeah, because we just kind of ran them over. So that's a quick, fun illustration of how to use some of the most elite cav in the game. Hope you found it useful. If you like this kind of content, remember to subscribe. See you later, nerds.